There has been a big increase in the number of times that would-be immigrants have been caught trying to get into Britain illegally. In the 4 months from April, there were more than 11,000 attempts, and that is more than the annual figure in previous years. Ministers argue they are strengthening border security. Our political correspondent, Carol Walker, has more details.
Every night, every day, desperate migrants try to find a way into Britain. Outside Calais, they wait for their chance. Lorry drivers have been warned not to stop within 100 miles of the port to prevent refugees clambering aboard. The French authorities say there are around 2,500 migrants camped out here.
I come to Calais because I want to go to England. That's the reason.
There were more than 10,900 illegal migrants stopped at UK ports in 2010. The figure had risen to more than 19,000 last year, and in just 4 months this year, there were more than 11,900. The Home Office say the reasons for the increase are complex. Yes, there are more people trying to get into the country illegally, but more of them are being stopped. It all underlines the pressure on the authorities, just as the Prime Minister is struggling to meet his target of reducing net migration below 100,000 by the coming election. The Independent Inspector of Borders says more resources are needed to keep track of illegal immigrants.
When clandestines, as they're known, are discovered in the backs of lorries, the photographs and fingerprints, the identity of these people wasn't captured. They were handed over to the French authorities. Very often those people will try again to get into the UK. If they're successful, the Home Office then has no record of them being in the hands of the British authorities to resist a potential asylum claim.
Labour say the government must work more closely with our European partners.
If I were the Minister today, I'd be on the phone to the French to say, why aren't you picking people up and assessing their status in France rather than letting them hover around Calais in large numbers.
The government is spending £12 million to improve security at the Channel ports, but the growing British economy means thousands more will do whatever they can to reach our shores. Carol Walker, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, let's talk to Tony Smith, who's a former head of the UK Border Force. He joins me via webcam. Thanks for your time this afternoon. Are you at all surprised by these figures today?
No, I'm not surprised at all. The main reason that the numbers are going up is because there's been unprecedented pressure on the European Union external front. Nations announced last week that the figures are about 180,000 illegal entries into the EU across the Mediterranean Sea, record numbers of drownings. And some of those people, not all of them, but some of them are migrating northward. Of course, there aren't any borders in the Schengen zone in Europe, and so you don't actually hit any border officials until you get to Calais where we are. And what we're seeing there is that our officers and our borders are holding up pretty well, and they're by and large stopping the flow.
So it's a case of more and more people are trying to come for whatever reason, some of that to do with political unrest in other parts of the world, but also more of them are being caught. So is that just the nature of where we are now?
Well, I think you need to look at world events and look upstream to where they're coming from. But many of the illegal migrants that enter the EU are boarding unseaworthy vessels on the North Libyan coast. Now, we were at a congress last week with a few border experts talking about this, but it seems that there are armed gangs patrolling there, basically protecting the domain of loading migrants who've come up from sub-Saharan Africa onto vessels for vast amounts of money. There's anarchy in that country. There is no effective government or control. These gangs are armed, and it's a very, very sad and miserable business. But the migrant smugglers are having a field day down there getting people into the EU. Once they're in the EU, the receiving states, which is predominantly Italy, are not able to deal with the numbers other than simply to ensure that they've been registered, and then once they're in Europe, as I say, they will fall into the hands of more traffickers and put in safe houses and headed northwards, some headed to the UK, some to the Netherlands, some to Germany, where they want to try and to settle.
And I mean, therefore, is there anything more that border officials can be doing? I mean, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but your tone is quite fatalistic, really. We are all at the mercy of international, global events, political events rather, and staff right now are doing the best they can. Is that your contention?
Well, I think it is important we continue to operate on the international scene. There are initiatives underway in the EU to try to establish relations in places like Libya and Syria, to try to have proper EU-wide controls on the Mediterranean Sea and across the Balkans to shore up the European border through the European Border Agency. That's Frontex, so we need to support that. We do need to work collaboratively with the French authorities in Calais to get after the criminal gangs and the networks that are making money out of this miserable business. And here, the government does need to make sure, as John Vine says, that there is sufficient resources available to us in the Home Office and in the Border Force to make sure that we can keep up the very robust controls in Calais that we have there now.
Tony Smith, thank you very much for your time, as ever, former head of the UK Border Force.